Good morning, congregation. A pastor and a well-known Christian author once made this statement. The milestones of history are marked by people who have met impossible demands. How true this is, as we see examples of people in history who achieved what seemed to be impossible tasks. Roger Bannister, on the 6th of May 1954, made history by becoming the first man on this planet to run the mile under 4 minutes. Before that, many runners had attempted to break the 4-minute barrier, but none came close. Scientists and doctors thought then that it was impossible for the human body to run at such a pace. They said that the human body would break down and the person attempting might die as a result. Roger Bannister proved them wrong. And what is interesting is that after this record was broken, a string of people around the world began to run a mile under 4 minutes. It seems like it is just a mental barrier that needed to be overcome. And once this mental barrier is broken, this so-called human inadequacy became a myth. Now, closer to home, we know the story of our founding father, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew. In 1965, Singapore separated from Malaysia to become an independent sovereign state. The separation was a result of political and economic differences between the ruling party of both states. In this picture, we see a TV clip where Lee Kuan Yew made the announcement of the separation to the public with heavy hearts, and he was choked with tears. After the separation, it was thought that Singapore, due to small size and limited resource, would not survive. Lee Kuan Yew and his compatriots were faced with an insurmountable task of building a nation, referred to some cynically as a tiny red dot. Looking at where we are now, we know what had happened. He and his team had succeeded and brought us to where we are now. In today's passage, we see Moses presented with a humanly impossible task by God. He was to deliver the children of Israel out of slavery from Egypt. How was Moses going to do that? Conventional human wisdom would rule out any chances of success. With no military resources and external help, how was an 80-year-old shepherd, and a fugitive as well, going to lead a nation of more than a few million out of Egypt? The idea would seem ridiculous to any onlooker. Moses, however, succeeded and would lead Israel out. We may not be called to become a national hero like Moses, but many of our challenges seem as difficult to us as God's assignment to him. Moses faced an impossible demand with intense personal struggle, but this eventually made him to be the Lord's anointed leader. One of the main lessons from today's passage is to learn to trust God in the face of overwhelming obstacles. The key to trusting God and overcoming our inadequacy is to see Him for who He really is, His character and His attributes. Before we begin, shall we pray? Father, help us to see lessons from the life of Moses. May we see your character and your attributes clearly and learn to trust you more. Help me as the speaker to speak your truth clearly according to your will. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Two weeks ago, Elder Ji Hong preached on Exodus chapter 1 to 2. We learned that God fulfilled His promises to Abraham and Israel increased in numbers greatly. We saw that they suffered much affliction under hard labor as if God had forgotten them. Yet God was sovereign. They continued to increase in numbers. God had also intervened on Pharaoh's plan to reduce the population. we saw the birth of baby Moses, how God had protected this baby and eventually led him to enter Pharaoh's household, becoming a prince of Egypt. We saw the baby Moses, how God protected this baby and eventually led him to enter Pharaoh's household, becoming a prince of Egypt. Then, when Moses had grown up, he ventured out of the palace to see his own people. He was angry when he saw one of them treated harshly by an Egyptian. He murdered the Egyptian and hid his body. Following day, when he tried to intervene between two quarreling Hebrews, he was snubbed and realized that his crime was exposed as one of them had seen him kill the Egyptian. Rejected by his own people and fearing for Pharaoh, who was after his life, Moses fled to the land of Egypt, got married, and settled down. In today's chapter, we fast forward to 40 years later. Here, we see an older Moses standing to a flock, alone in a desert near Horeb, where Mount Sinai was located. How was Moses like here? From the book of Acts, we know that he was about 80 years old. By the way, he's 1 year older than my father. My father is 79, so he's 80 years old now, so we will see this in perspective. 40 years have passed since he fled Egypt. He was likely living a quiet life, a family man with wife and children. Spending many years in the desert and tending to the flock, he would have probably plenty of time alone with God, perhaps praying constantly for his people back in Egypt. The last thing on his mind was to receive an assignment from God. Yet, in God's will, the moment was right. You see, God had prepared the young Moses in Pharaoh's palace for 40 years. Acts chapter 7 verse 22 described him as educated with the wisdom of Egyptians, mighty in words and deeds. Moses would be familiar with the ways and politics of the palace. He had been an Egyptian royalty, yet he was also a Hebrew. So he was unique in the sense that he had been in both worlds. Then God humbled Moses in the next 40 years as a shepherd. There seemed to be a phase then where God had prepared him with a relevant background, and then another phase where God had mellowed him down. Now, God deemed him ready to deliver Israel. At this juncture, we see that God sovereignly engineers his people's life, molding them and preparing them for his purposes. And it starts us off into thinking, are we able to see the workings of God in the different phases of our life? If so, we can trust him and his direction for us. For example, are you one feeling compelled or burdened by God to serve full-time in Christian ministry, but question why through circumstances and events you are stuck in a so-called secular job? By the way, no job is secular. Have you stopped to think that perhaps God is using this job to prepare you for Christian ministry? Example, you are an office administrator or teacher, and you wonder why. Could it be that God is using this vocation, building you with relevant skills like administration or teaching for future Christian work? Are you working in a stressful environment with a very difficult boss? I once had. You question the wisdom of this situation, you complain and you want out. Have you stopped to think that perhaps God is molding your character? Could he be humbling you, making you patient, allowing you to trust and walk close with him? Let us reflect on God, on the different phases of our life, and entrust ourselves to him. As we go on to verse 2, the Lord appeared to Moses in the form of an angel. Moses' attention was diverted to a burning bush. A burning bush in a desert is a common sight. After all, deserts are scorching hot, and bushes often caught fire. What was so special about this bush? It was burning but not consumed. Then the scripture says, the Lord saw that he turned aside to see. God called out to him, and Moses responded with, "Here I am." After that, God made it very clear with his presence that the ground that Moses was standing was holy ground. Moses was to keep his distance and take off his sandals. God was telling Moses that because he's holy, there's a separation between God and man. God and man will never be the same. How much more that of a sinful man? Moses was not to come near, or else he would be consumed by the fire. In verse 6, when Moses finally realized that he was speaking to God, he hid his face, probably out of the sheer realization of his sinfulness and the majestic holiness of God. From this episode, we see that God is holy, we are sinful. And this ought to make us to have a high view of God's holiness and a low view of sin. What is God's holiness defined as? It is defined as Him being different and separate from us. He's set apart from everything that He has made. The Creator is infinitely distinct from the creature. It also meant that He's without sin. Have we come to grasp the holiness of God fully in our lives? When we do, we will treat sin as serious and hate it. We will desire the holiness of God in our lives. We will want to live righteously, give Him the awe and the respect that He deserves. This extends right into our daily lives and relationship, be it at work, family, church, or even with non-believers. It reflects in the way we carry our work with integrity, in our value system that is different from the world, and our desire to glorify Him in every respect. Although God is revealed as holy in the first 6 verses, we do notice that God took the initiative to reach out to Moses. He was not the impersonal God, as He declared His intention and purpose to Moses in verse 7. In verse 7, God planned to deliver Israel from bondage to the Egyptians and bring them to a land so resourceful that it is being described as flowing with milk and honey, and so broad that it was occupied by 6 nations. There were the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And I remember somebody in the past, I can't remember what his name is, collectively, he called them the insecticides. So what motivated God to act on behalf of His people? In verses 7 to 10, we can count about 4 times that God has either seen the affliction of His people or heard their cries. The emphasis here is that God had not forsaken His people. He remembered them, He loved them enough to act. And we see here another aspect of our God. Our God is a personal God who takes the initiative to save. And so, we can entrust ourselves to a knowing and knowable God. God is not an impersonal God who was ignorant of the plight of Israel and who stand by and do nothing. In fact, verse 8 uses a very interesting phrase to describe what God would do. In verse 8 it says, I have come down to deliver them. The thought of a holy God taking such a personal action is sobering. It means a God who loves, who acts, and have our best interests at heart. He's both knowing and knowable. He knows what bothers us many a times. He reveals Himself in our troubles, and He will not reject those who approach Him. As believers, we can entrust ourselves to this personal God. He cares more than we realize. And for those of us sitting here who have yet to know God, I want you to know that He has made Himself known through the person of Jesus Christ, who had personally visited us more than 2,000 years ago. You can entrust Jesus to save you from the bondage of sin and give you eternal life. So, as verse 8 describes God coming down to deliver Israel from their plight, verse 10 reveals God's plan. Moses would be the person included in this plan, as God says in verse 10, "Come, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt." Now, Moses should have been thrilled to be chosen to lead Israel out of slavery, but the next few verses showed otherwise. There was a lengthy conversation between Moses and God, in which Moses either asked questions, stated a fact, or pleaded with God. All in all, it's about 5 times. Each time, God responded back. And as God responded back, we learn more about God's character. So, Moses' first response is, "Who am I to bring them out?" Moses was feeling a sense of inadequacy for the job. He questioned both his identity and his ability. Well, maybe he might have looked at his past and felt ashamed. After all, wasn't he a fugitive on the run for murder of an Egyptian? Wasn't he rejected by his own people as he tried to make peace between the two Hebrews who quarreled? In short, he had been a failure and a reject. Then, he might have looked at the future and saw obstacles in front of him. Who was he to convince his own people? Who was he to stand in Pharaoh's court? He might have been a prince of Egypt, but now he's just a keeper of the flock. These thoughts could have crossed his mind and made him feel inadequate. Perhaps Moses could have been truly humble and careful. He was no longer the impulsive, younger version of that prince of Egypt. He reasoned a job so important as such should not be given to him. Whatever the reason, God had one big assurance for him. God's promise and presence will be with him, and that is enough. God promised His presence to those who do His will. And as such, our fears and inadequacy become irrelevant when we focus on Him. Notice here that God did not respond directly to Moses' question of "Who am I?" Instead, God answered him indirectly that He would be with Moses. God did not start off by addressing Moses' capabilities and on why he was chosen. But God wanted Moses to take the focus off himself, put it where it should be, which is God Himself. God's identity, His ability, and His presence were what Moses needed. The problem with us is that our focus tends to be inward rather than upward. Isn't that very true? And that's human nature. Suppose Pastor Vincent approached you or me with a task or ministry challenge. Our first reaction would normally be inward, right? Usually we'll ask ourselves, "Who am I? Can I do it?" Perhaps a better reaction is to look upward, asking ourselves, "Is this God's will?" Praying for wisdom and guidance, thanking Him even, allowing God to address our fears and inadequacy. So let's get our focus right. From asking, "Who am I?" the conversation turned outward to, "Who are you? How am I to tell others?" Again, this is human nature at play. From inward, rather than going outward, we also tend to go outward. What will others think? How How was Moses to describe the name of God to Israel? This might seem like an irrelevant question, but actually it was quite valid. We need to remember that Israel had been immersed in Egyptian culture and other gods for a period of over 400 years. Many of them perhaps are not familiar with the God of their fathers. Moses needed to have something to tell them about this God who saved Israel. God replied, I am who I am. Please tell the people, I am has sent me to you. Now, I must admit I have great difficulty accepting this answer upon first reading. I mean, what kind of answer is this? If you were to ask someone, right, who are you? And he said, I am who I am. You'll think the person is trying to be funny, right? It is as good as not giving you an answer. But here lies the key to understanding I am who I am. There's no definite answer to who God is that is humanly comprehensible. The name and nature of God cannot be boxed neatly in an answer we would like to hear. If it could, God will not be God. God told Moses his name was I am because God simply is. There was never a time where he did not exist or a time where he would cease to exist. God is completely independent and doesn't need anybody or anything. He's eternal and unchanging. He's the uncreated creator. The fact that we can know about him is only because he wants us to know about him. I am also means that God becomes whatever that is lacking in our need. The name I am contains a blank in which God fills the need of his people. Jesus in the book of John used the word I am many times. He uses the word I am to describe how he will meet the need of his people. When we are in spiritual darkness, Jesus declared, I am the light. When we are spiritually hungry, Jesus declared, I am the bread of life. I am who I am is also connected with the Hebrew name Yahweh, from which the English word Jehovah is derived. It is such a powerful and sacred name that when the Jewish scribe wrote down the scripture and the word YHWH is encountered, they would take a break, cleanse and purify themselves before resuming to write again. And this process will repeat itself whenever they encounter this word. So, after God declared himself as the I am, he gave Moses specific things he has to say to the elders of Israel and the king of Egypt. Moses was to announce to his own people that not only God had seen their affliction, it was also time for them to go back to Canaan. This is in fulfillment to what God had promised to Abraham. In Genesis, God made a covenant with Abraham. He would be the father of a great nation, and his descendants would inherit the promised land. These promises were later repeated to Isaac and to Jacob. In saying this to his own people, Moses would imply that the I am is a covenant-keeping God. And truth for life is that we can entrust ourselves to the promises of the I am who is faithful. Today, the believer has the presence of the powerful I am that address our inadequacies. Are you faced with a daunting task that God has placed upon your heart, unsolvable by human wisdom? Is it to share the gospel or to counsel a difficult person? His soul look towards the I am. The I am also keeps his promises to believers today. His promise will never be broken. He will never forsake us. And the most important of this promise is regarding our salvation. For the believer who has trusted in Jesus, that person's salvation is secure. The covenant-keeping God is faithful to bring our salvation to complete fulfillment. Not only is God faithful regarding his many promises, he is reassuring as well. He provides guidance concerning the present. We see that in verses 18 to 22, where God assured Moses that the elders of Israel will listen to him, Pharaoh would eventually submit by God's mighty hand. The children of Israel will surely be enriched by plundering of the Egyptians, and that without going to war. In other words, what God was telling Moses, that the outcome was sure. Israel was surely going to be delivered and come out wealthy. Moses needed only to follow God's direction. As the conversation moved on, Moses asked a third question. What if they will not believe me? Well, despite God saying that the elders of Israel will listen, Moses had doubts about it. Somehow he seemed to be telling God that, I think you may be wrong about this. Are you sure about this? In Hokkien, what do we call this? When somebody has said something and you kind of like resist that person again. In Hokkien, we call this tiki, right? But God was patient and addressed his uncertainties. God gave Moses two signs in the form of miracles to help him convince the elders. Firstly, he turned the staff from Moses' hand into a serpent. God commanded Moses to catch the serpent by the tail. Actually, this was the most dangerous way to catch a snake. You should catch the snake by the head. If you catch it by the tail, the snake will bite you. So Moses did that, and the serpent turned back into a star. As the giver of life, God displayed his power to turn a non-living object into a living object. He gave Moses the ability to subdue the hostile serpent and render it powerless, even with a weak and insensible response of catching it by the tail. God was showing Moses that he would give him the power to subdue whatever that is hostile to him. Moses needed only to respond. For the second sign, God had transformed Moses' hand into a leprous hand and then back to normal again, showing that he had the power to inflict illness as well as to heal. With God behind him, Moses would have control over health and life, and this included those of the Egyptians. Now, God had a third sign, which would be given in the face of unbelief. In this sign, water taken from the river Nile would become blood on dry land. Now, the river Nile was an important part of the Egyptians' life and their sustenance. Egypt's agriculture and economy would not have existed without the Nile. The Egyptians would even worship the Nile as a god. When the Nile water becomes blood, this sign is symbolic of God's judgment. If unbelief persisted when the first two miracles was performed, the third sign would serve as a warning. Though it may not seem miraculous sign from God like Moses did, if we stop to think about it, there are likely many incidents we can recall of God's blessing, His enabling or equipping us in the past. God was showing Moses that He would never leave him alone in this task. Similarly, God never leaves us alone. It is easy to fall into the trap of human reasoning, to become doubtful of God's promises, to forget what He has done for us. The conversation then moved on to the fourth statement. Moses said, I can't speak well. He felt he was not eloquent enough, be it past or present. But was Moses justified in saying this? Remember Acts chapter 7, verse 22. It was stated that and Moses was instructed in all the wisdom of the Egyptian, and he was mighty in words and deeds. He was once a skilled speaker when he was a prince of Egypt. Perhaps he had lost confidence after all these years of tending to sheep. Maybe he felt he has lost touch. He used to speak to powerful and influential people as a prince. These days, as one of the sisters in our Friday IDG mentioned, Sister Chloe pointed out, nowadays he only speaks to sheep. I would also like to think that since he spent many years in the desert alone, I think sometimes when he's bored, he speaks to thin air as well. Anyway, to that, God had a response. God reminded Moses that he is the sovereign God who created the mouth and the ability to speak. And even if Moses was a poor speaker, he could turn him into a good one. Moses had only to make himself available. So the miracles, the signs, and God's reasoning point to this implication. Our God is mighty and sovereign, equipping us when we make ourselves available. And so we can learn from past blessings and commit our inadequacies to God. Our perceived inadequacy may be real, or it may be imagined, but does it really matter? What God was telling Moses and us today is that He promised to address our weaknesses when we make ourselves available. And we can learn from the past, recall instances where God had helped or enabled us, just as God showed Moses signs that he can rely on. Okay, now it seemed like Moses had run out of words. He said what was really in his heart in the last of this 5-part conversation. He said, please send someone else. God addressed all his concerns, yet he lacked willingness. He felt a sense of dread and perhaps fear, and would rather that God send someone else. So, the scripture says that God then burned with anger. Seemed like Moses was in real trouble now, right? How could he speak to a holy God like that? As I was reading, I was afraid that the fire from the bush would jump out and consume him. Here God appeared to relent and accommodate Moses by providing Aaron, his brother, to be his spokesman. But I would like to point out that this was not without a price. Moses could have been both God's representative and spokesperson at the same time, but he had rejected this opportunity. We see later in other parts of the Old Testament that Aaron would occasionally turn out to be the source of problem for Moses. Aaron would be the one to promote the worship of the golden calf. Aaron's son would serve as priest, would serve in pure offerings before the Lord and be killed by God. And Aaron himself would lead a rebellion against Moses. So that moment of unwillingness and rejection of God's offer would turn out to be some form of a regret